Hi, boys and girls. So, as you know, we're starting a new unit about figurative language. So, I just kind of want to review with you guys what figurative language is, and then we're going to be reading a really awesome book that has a lot of beautiful figurative language in it. So, I want you guys to listen and pay attention. Before we begin, though, I do want to just review some figurative language with you. You'll also notice that these are words that are going to be on your new Gim kit. So pay attention. So one of them is a simile. So a simile is when you compare two unlike things using the words like or as. So for example, you might say she was as sweet as pie. So you're comparing a girl to pie and trying to get someone to understand how very sweet this girl is. Now, is she literally sweet like sugar? No, but the way that she acts makes you think of sweetness, right? The next one is a metaphor. A metaphor is when you compare two unlike things again, but this time you just say that something is something else, right? So you might say something like, she was a real ham. Now, do you mean that she's really a ham? No. When people say that someone else is a ham, it usually means that they are entertaining, maybe funny. The next one is my favorite, a hyperbole, because I use it all the time. A hyperbole is when you exaggerate something. So you might say like, I was so hungry I could eat a horse. Are you really going to eat a horse? No way, but you're just that hungry that you want to eat a lot. So that's what the figurative language means. Another one is onomatopoeia. An onomatopoeia is a sound word like boom, crash, bang. There's some onomatopoeia in the story that I'm going to read you, so we'll talk about that. Personification is another one where you give a inanimate object, you give it human-like qualities. So for example, you might say, the couch snuggled me in. Well, can a couch really snuggle you? No, but you're just trying to say that you were, the couch was very comfy, made you feel like it was giving you a hug. And then another one is called alliteration. Alliteration is when you use the same sound at the beginning of words to describe something. So like, she sells seashells at the seashore. They all start with S or SH. That's called alliteration. Some other words, these are definitely going to be on your Gim kit, are words like imagery. All figurative language is trying to help you create a picture in your mind. So if I say she's sweet as pie, that's going to help you really visualize how sweet this person is versus me just saying, oh, like she's really nice. You know, doesn't have the same effect. Another one might be like a symbolism of something else. You're going to see a lot of symbolism in our story. I don't think symbolism, the actual word, is on your Gim kit, but imagery and symbolism kind of go together. So these things symbolize something else. You're not going to take them literal, obviously. So we're going to be reading a story that has lots of figurative language in it. During this next unit, we're going to be reading a lot of poetry too. So we're going to review some poetry words. On your Gim kit, you might see stanza again. You're going to also see a verse and rhyme. These are all things that you're going to find in poetry. You're going to be writing poetry this week. So all of this is going to kind of go together. So the story that we're going to read today is called Owl Moon. And I'm going to read the whole book to you. And then afterwards, we're going to kind of go through and talk about some figurative language that was in the story. And we're going to talk about why the author chose to use this figurative language instead of just using like literal terms. All right. So sit back and enjoy. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind, the trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, like a sad, sad song. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled down over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out, trains and dogs, for a real long time. And when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on toward the woods, Pa and I. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and the little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up. My short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out, "If you go owling, you have to be quiet." That's what Pa always says. I'd been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. We reached the line of pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. Then he called, "Hoo, hoo, hoo," the sound of a great horned owl. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Again he called out, and then again. After each call, he was silent, and for a moment we both listened, for there was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said, sometimes there's an owl, and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold, as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back, and my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time. But I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kind of things hide behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand. At that sound, I put my mittens over the scarf, over my mouth, and I listened hard. And then Pa called, "Hoo, hoo." I listened, and I looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. "Hoo, hoo, hoo." Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, "Hoo, hoo, hoo," just as if he and the owl were talking about supper or about the woods or the moon or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf, off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl came closer from high up in the trees on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl's shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with the heat in our mouths, the heat of all those words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Paul turned on his big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch like a shadow without a sound. It flew back into the forest. Time to go home, Paul said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud, but I was a shadow as we walked home. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says. The kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. Okay, there was some great figurative language in this story. This story is so pretty. I just love the way that the author has written the story, and the words that the author chose to use just makes it so exciting. It wouldn't be as much fun if the author just used literal, bland words. So let's go through and let's look at some of this fantastic figurative language and imagery. So right from the beginning, when she says, somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew long and low like a sad, sad song. She's comparing a whistle to a sad song, and she used the word like to make that comparison. So that is a simile. On that same page, she says the trees stood as giant statues. That's also a simile. She's comparing trees to giant statues, and she used the word as to compare the two. So both of those are really good similes. There's just a ton in here. Here's another simile when she said, and when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. So she's comparing voices being as quiet as a dream. Another simile on that one. This is a metaphor that I found in here that I really liked. It said, the moon made his face into a silver mask. So she's saying that his face is a silver mask, so that's a metaphor. That's the difference between a simile and a metaphor. They did not use the word as or like. She just said that the face was a silver mask, so that's a metaphor. Onomatopoeia that was in this book was all of the hooting, the hoo, hoo. That's when the word sounds just like the sound that the owl makes. So that's some good onomatopoeia there. One more that I want to point out, because I don't want to give them all away, because you've got to try to find these on your own and tell me what they mean. This was a hyperbole. On this page here, where the owl's staring at them, she says, for 1 minute, for 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. So they probably really didn't stare at each other for 100 minutes. But the author's trying to get across the point that it felt like a really long time that they stared at each other, the owl and the little girl and the dad. So instead of just saying they stared at each other for a long time, it's kind of boring. they use hyperboles. So there's a lot more in this book that are, I mean, just even the adjectives that she uses when she talks about like her shadow bumping into her. I mean, her shadow's not really bumping into her, right? Like, but she's just saying that she could see her shadow following behind her. There's just a lot in this book, so it's a really good one. So I'm not going to give any more away. I want you to go and do your activity. You can listen to this story again if you'd like to. I also put a hard copy on Google Classroom for you, so if you want to go back and look at that, and then get busy. All right, enjoy. I can't wait to see what you come up with.